This episode of Exploration Radio has been made possible by the support of the Minerals Council of Australia. Find out why there's more to Australian mining and join the Friends of Australian Mining supporter network by visiting minerals.org.au.
I am the Kolosepebe. In short, I say TK. My job specifically is to recover diamonds from the concentrate. This is my hope every day, to find big diamonds. I think about that in the bus every day. This is my mission. It's like my mission.
This episode of the Exploration Radio podcast was also sponsored by the AIG, the Australian Institute of Geoscientists. To learn more about the AIG, the program it supports, or to become a member, please go to aig.org.au. That's aig.org.au.
Ira, why did Lucara decide to acquire Clara? Clara is an affordable, potentially high-value growth opportunity for the company, which is very consistent and compatible with our existing diamond mining operations in Africa. And Clara is a secure digital sales platform that combines proprietary analytics with cloud and blockchain technologies to completely modernize how diamonds are sold, removing huge inefficiencies and creating assurance from mine to finger. The way we sell diamonds really hasn't changed in over 100 years, and in our view is ripe for disruption. And we think Clara will be the industry's first true blockchain to unlock considerable value in the diamond value pipeline for producers and manufacturers alike.
Previously on Exploration Radio.
It was incredibly difficult, and the reason we ended up partnering with Rio Tinto was because we basically ran out of options. We could not finance Aber Resources, the land package that we'd acquired. We ended up selling a majority, 60% interest in what has turned out to be a $15 billion asset for $10 million. Larger diamond deposits are really heading into their, final years of production. And in fact, the Argyle mine that we talked about a moment ago, it closed its doors last year. And I have the latest edition of those sled dogs sitting right beside me right now as we're having this conversation. They're fourth and fifth generations removed from that same sled dog Thor, who are constantly, harassing me to take them into the mountains. So yeah, the timing was perfect for sure. I would say that, the Australians were actually the first to kind of break rank with the central selling organization. They were the first to kind of really challenge that paradigm and, went independent with the Argyle diamond mine, and that sort of, that discovery was in the late 70s. And I think that certainly was something that helped, the Canadians get there. And obviously with BHP partnering with Diamet on the first Canadian diamond mine, made the decision very early on that they would not be selling their diamonds through De Beers or the central selling organization. So that really paved the way for other producers coming behind them to also look at the opportunity of selling independently. Though they are a mined commodity, they don't actually behave like a mined commodity because they're a consumer marketed product.
Eira Thomas started her career as an exploration geologist when she was part of the team that discovered what became the Diavik Diamond mine, Canada's second major diamond discovery, and arguably one of the richest diamond mines in the world. In part 1 of our interview with Eira, we talked about how she got started in the industry, the events that led to the Diavik discovery, and how her career led her to now being the CEO of Lucara Diamond. In this episode, we continue our discussion with Eira. We find out what she sees as the future of the diamond industry, particularly in a world where sustainability and corporate social responsibility are playing an increasingly important part. My name is Ahmad Saleem. You're listening to Exploration Radio, and this is part 2 of our interview with Eira Thomas. This episode of Exploration Radio was sponsored by the SEG, the Society of Economic Geologists. Eira Thomas, welcome to Exploration Radio.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
And so the first question is, what is something that you think needs to die in mining? Something that we need to get rid of our industry?
You did send me these questions. And we talked about before kind of inclusion and diversity. And I think that there is certainly a perception that mining is still very male dominated. I think that is changing. It's definitely been a bit slow, but I think it really is about continuing to watch that and push for that kind of transformation and trying to get more and more women into senior roles. I think we've done a good job in certain parts of the business, but there still is that challenge of the glass ceiling where you just don't see very many women executives now pushing into the excos. Sorry, I've got dogs jumping around in here right now, so that was probably not very good.
No, that's fine. That fits in well with our earlier discussion about your dog story, so that's perfect.
I honestly think the mining industry as a whole has gone through a pretty important transformation, not just in recent years, but I would say over the last 25 years that I've been really active in the business. I think at that time there really was this kind of view that the world had to catch up and recognize the importance of mining. I think that we quickly migrated to we as an industry need to modernize. We need to recognize that there are some uncomfortable legacies that exist within the mining industry, and we have to own those. So I think that's a big part of it, not passing the buck, but recognizing that the world has changed and we understand and know a lot more about impacts on the environment, and we understand, and know how to develop mining projects more responsibly with a longer view to, full cycle reclamation. So I think, that's been a big kind of evolution. And of course, in recent years, that's kind of migrated more into the social arena or the sustainability space in and around communities that are now very much key stakeholders and partners in the process.
Yep.
And into the, the realm of governance and inclusion and diversity. So I think our industry, has demonstrated that it's capable of changing, but we've still got a lot more work to do.
So there's a couple of points in there that I'll circle back to. But first, conversely, what is something that we need to keep in mining at all costs? Something that's fundamental to our DNA that we shouldn't forget?
Well, I think every industry really has to be able to reflect on where they've been. I think it's really important to take the achievements of the past. Canada, for example, has been a great mining nation. This is a country that's been built on its development of its natural resources. And there's a lot of expertise that's been developed in this country, whether it be on the technical side around mineral exploration or engineering, or even on the financial side and the development of the Toronto Stock Exchange and the capital markets that finance early stage exploration. So I think there's a lot of really positive things. What we have to do is kind of marry that wealth of experience with a more innovative, forward-thinking agenda. And I think if we can do that, then we really have a very compelling combination where you modernized an industry that's got a strong future, especially as we think about the whole energy transformation. That's kind of the favorite buzzword around the industry.
That's right. But I think there are important points in the fact that we are a very energy intensive industry, and also the fact that the major cost of kind of the energy point of view is how do you get energy out to kind of the remote site where mines tend to be. That is a fundamental cost. So what does the world look like when, say, we start using another source of energy, which is maybe, say, a little bit more expensive, or you have to be a little bit more sustainable from the energy point of view? I think these are quite a big issues that we're going to have to address at some point.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's already happening. And again, it comes back to that decision making and that balance, right, between what you want to achieve as a society in terms of your cost of energy or your cost of resources that we use each and every day versus the potential energy or CO2 footprint associated with the production of those materials that we all are need and use and don't intend to give up, like our cell phones
That's
and our
right.
cars and basically everything we have in our lives today that we don't grow in our garden.
I mean, that's right. Yeah, like we've effectively become a consumer society. So it does mean that, yeah, it's not like we're going to go back to a 1800 lifestyle where everyone's growing their own food and you only live with what you need. So a lot of these things are going to have to be done in a sustainable world. And what does that world look like when the consumer wants to be more environmentally conscious and the industry has to kind of deliver a product that they're going to want to buy in that sense?
Yeah, and I think transparency has a lot to do with it. I mean, I think we need to be educating everyone about how and what we do and what the environmental cost associated with that is and what the benefits are. And I think that education is really important because the consumer has an important role to play, right? We are producing the products that the world is consuming on a daily basis. And if we do that in a transparent way, so it's very clear what the potential impacts of those developments are, then they're in a position to, be making those decisions and taking responsibility for those decisions, I think, too.
So, Ira, so you mentioned a little bit earlier, and I want to touch on this a little bit. You mentioned the concept that historically we were a very male-dominated industry, and you've obviously had quite a long career in this industry, and I think like somewhat uniquely about your career is the fact that you started quite early, and you've had this kind of long residency time in the industry. So do you care to comment a little bit how the industry has changed to allow someone like yourself, and particularly women, to stay in the industry around the time when, like people want to have families, people want to be a little bit more sedentary for all intents and purposes, and can't go, traveling around or can't do kind of the field time required for a lot of roles. So how have you kind of managed that challenge in your career?
Well, listen, I think businesses have to adapt. It's not only mining, but there are many industries and businesses that are feeling the same sorts of pressures. But for women in particular in the mining industry, that has been a definite challenge in the past of trying to find that appropriate work-life balance, and particularly when it comes to travel into remote areas. And, initially this was a problem for our high potential female leaders, but it also evolved to become a problem for our high potential young men as well, because increasingly they find themselves in relationships and having partners that had careers that had to be managed as well. So there was no longer one partner making the decision or agreeing to be the parent or spouse that would stay home so the other could go and fulfill their duties in some high powered career. Increasingly it's about balancing two high powered careers, and so I think that really necessitated, a different outlook. When I started in this business, you got told you were going off for 4 months and you were just happy to have a job, and you went off for 4 months and there was no deliberation.
That's right.
Today it's definitely, well, if I'm going to go for 2 or 3 weeks, then I've got to balance that off against, 2 weeks back in the city. So my spouse can manage that through their own job priorities. And these are not easy things for sure. But I think given the way that we have embraced technology in recent years, and certainly through this COVID period, we've come to really understand that we can get business done remotely, and that you don't always have to be there in person. And I think that part has helped. And I think this sort of view that you can take, periodic timeouts from your busy day job and still come back in and not having lost your sort of place in line, if you like. I think that was a big fear for a lot of career women that wanted to go off and have a child and worried about going on maternity leave and basically forfeiting, a lot of their future career potential. So I think employers are more sensitized to this. I think they now understand that there's a real value in working with their high potential leaders to incorporate these important personal aspirations and ambitions, because if you want to get the most out of that employee, then you've got to work to accommodate the other important kind of aspirations and their life work balance equation.
That's right. I mean, I think, there's a couple of points you made which I think are quite interesting. Like when I kind of look at this problem, and I know this is something that the industry talks about a lot, like one of the things I kind of think about is, for a large part, we are a very technical industry. And if you take any technical job, and if someone spends a couple of years out of a technical field, what you really need to look at is how much that technical field changes in that time. So if you took a 6-month break, you might be ancient by the time you come back because of the way things have developed. And I guess, like structurally, I kind of always saw this problem in that, not just women, but if men wanted to take time out, and you made this great point, like I will put myself as that example. Like there came a point where being on the road 300 days of the year wasn't appealing to me anymore. And so that kind of narrows the type of roles that you can probably go for in that particular part of your career as well. So I always think that there's a bit of a structural problem in the fact that, if you are a technical industry and if you don't create other technical avenues where, someone can step away for a couple of years, to take care of whatever personal stuff they want to take care of, and then come back and don't feel like they are way behind the wave, and then now feel that, their career progression is going to be hampered by that time out. And I don't think we've quite, it's only recently, I think, that we've kind of started addressing the problem in that sense, rather than, we just got to find people that are happy to travel 300 days on the road.
That's right. I mean, you have to find different ways to achieve the same outcome, and it doesn't mean that it has to mean 300 days on the road like it perhaps used to. It doesn't mean that you don't have a certain amount of travel that needs to be accommodated. That obviously has to happen, but I think there is just a much greater willingness by senior leaders and boards to try and accommodate, the needs of their high potential people. And I think that's been a big evolution in the mining industry. I think when I first started in this business, things were just the way they were. Mining was a rough business. Mining business was, in many situations, an unsafe business where, this just comes with the territory. This is just the way it's done. And we have to accept that there's a certain amount of risk in this kind of business. I think we've evolved to the point now where, the culture of the mining industry is vastly different. Safety is a priority. No fatality is acceptable.
That's right. Yeah. And that's been a massive shift, I think, from what, the way things used to be done in kind of the 80s and the 90s, or, that era where, this type of risk was known, but like you wouldn't put any resources or anything behind to kind of change that. It was just like, it is what it is, and we'll just work with it.
Yeah, no, and I think there's been just a huge shift in attitude. It's kind of an industry that is, used to pride itself on being able to, bootstrap anything, and, the tenacious people that could go into remote places and difficult places and create value for shareholders. And in this industry, the people themselves are very resourceful to, I think a more mature culture now where, sure, all of that is still very characteristic of our industry. But now we know that there are better ways to run these operations, safer ways to run these operations, more productive ways to run these operations, and that it doesn't have to be a completely male-dominated agenda. We have, for example, at Lucara, we are 85% female in our executive team. The managing director of our mine in Botswana is a woman. We have female truck drivers in the pit. These are all things that 20 years ago would be extraordinary. And they're still unusual today, but they are not nearly as rare an occurrence to see women, working, in the mine, running dozers and trucks and actually active at that level. So I think that's a real plus and a real positive, but we've still got a long way to go.
One of the things I find interesting is, while I was doing the research for you, there was a lot of mentions on the fact that, a lot of your accomplishments are regarded as, I think, accomplishments because you are a woman that has succeeded in this industry. Do you think that, we're getting to a point where we can be a little bit more gender agnostic when we talk about people's achievements? And I guess I'm asking your personal perspective in the fact that, like how people view you, or like the type of, say, criticism or plaudits you get when you kind of take different roles. I guess the view that people take on your career is changing in that sense.
I certainly hope so. I have always believed in a meritocracy. I think that being a woman in mining has had as many advantages as disadvantages, for sure. I think that there is a lot of people that, along the way for me, that have been real cheerleaders and supporters and mentors and really encouraged me. And then there are others, as you pointed out, that kind of look at it as, the fact that I'm an anomaly, being a woman in this industry that's really garnered most of the attention. So, I've always felt, ever since I started my career, that whatever potential bias you encounter in your job or in your workplace can be overcome by just hunkering down and getting the job done. And I think that's something I've always prided myself in. Whether someone had a view that you couldn't do it as a woman and you demonstrate that you can, or you're here because you're a woman, and so my expectations are lower. And I think in both those situations, it just makes you want to work harder to make sure that you kind of disprove those myths or dispel those biases. And I think a lot of women feel that way.
I mean, I guess it's the second point that you made that I find quite interesting, is that, like a lot of the rhetoric sometimes behind your achievements is, well, the achievements are impressive because if I put them in a smaller pool of only women in the industry, then it looks really impressive. And I feel like, we sometimes have this stigma of kind of putting people in a smaller pool to say, they're impressive, but they're impressive because, they're only competing against whatever, a smaller pool. And I guess I look at your career and you go, you stack your career against anyone, and I think it's quite impressive, the type of stuff you've done and the variability of stuff that you've done. And I guess it's something that I find that, obviously there's a marketing piece that kind of goes behind this as well for certain companies, but it's also the fact that as an industry, maybe we should move past the fact that we just kind of look at, like you said, based on people's merits and judge their performance based on that, rather than always trying to pigeonhole people into a smaller population and saying, whether they're impressive or not based on that.
Yeah, listen, I really would never want to be compared to, just my gender. That just seems ridiculous to me. At the end of the day, I am running a company that has a broad group of stakeholders, including shareholders, and my job is to make money for them. And that, at the end of the day, is a real test of my success. And I think it's as simple as that. Yes, I've had some really interesting opportunities throughout my career, and I've done a lot of incredible things and had the opportunity to be involved in a lot of amazing projects. And I don't think any of it is diminished because of my gender. I think these are all experiences that really have no relation to my gender, I guess. At the end of the day, as I said, the bottom line for me is that in any project I've taken on or any new challenge, it's really been about, measuring, success on the basis of whether I'm actually doing better for my stakeholders and shareholders.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, ultimately, that's the real test of whether you are successful in what you do or not. I mean, if you'd had a track record where you lost a lot of money for shareholders, like I'm sure the opportunities that you would be provided beyond that point would be diminished to some degree. You are getting the opportunities you're getting because of your track record of having done things previously. Yeah, I only asked that question because there was one interview that I read where I think, you made some pointed comments around the fact that you were sometimes questioned by investors when you've taken certain roles, whether whether the company needed to hire someone a little bit more capable to kind of run the certain company or the certain role.
No, absolutely. I've definitely found that, where I have encountered, well, you're not a mining engineer. What do you think you know about building an underground mine? Well, the same question posed to a male mining executive who'd been in the career for 35 years and been involved in a number of successful developments would never be asked that question. And I would point out that there are many men in this industry that have had spectacular failures and lost their shareholders a lot of money and gone on to be, seated by a headhunter and an impressive job the next time around. I would say the likelihood of a woman doing that is extremely low.
Completely agree.
And that point I would say there's many lives for some of my counterparts, I would say. And it's also a testament to the pool, the talent pool right now in this industry is so tiny, right? I always used to laugh with some of my, my peers in the same age that have been in this industry now for more than 25 or 30 years that, we almost win by default because there's just so few young people, choosing a career in mining, and that too is a problem. We have to be able to attract the top talent if we're going to continue to grow this industry in a sustainable way. And that's really where my comment about, you can have spectacular failures and go on to, fight another fight and live another, day.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's companies and people that seem to bob up every boom, and and you kind of look at their track record and go, there's no reason why you would ever give them the keys again to a company. But I think it's a fantastic point you make is this kind of retention problem that we run into in kind of the mid-career part of a lot of people in our industry. If you don't fix that, the problem kind of manifests itself on the other side, on kind of the executive level, where but like you said, by default, some people are just getting roles because there isn't anyone else around.
Yeah, and listen, it's not that I don't believe that people don't deserve second chances. This is a tough business. You can have your sights on the prize, and you hit the cycle at the wrong time, or you didn't manage the share structure as well as it should have been, and suddenly you find yourself in a situation where you don't have healthy value creation, and so that does happen.
And sometimes these things are just out of your control. Stakeholders can change their mind. The market changes. Investors kind of lose confidence in something. Sometimes there are just external factors that kind of railroad you in this process.
No, definitely, and I think that's why it's just so important to be able to, I think, learn from all of those experiences, and hopefully you take them with you, and you there isn't a single person, I don't believe, in this business that hasn't gone through some sort of trial or tribulation in this business, for all of those reasons. And I think the important thing is to kind of learn from that and try not to do that the next time. I'm sitting with a share price on an asset right now on a commodity that's very much out of favor, and it's half the value value that it was, 2 years ago. And yet the company has added significant resources to the bottom line and de-risked kind of the longer term growth strategy. And so, that's disappointing, but it also, fundamentally for the people that understand, the value that's there and being created, it represents a huge opportunity. And so, you have to turn those things into positives and recognize that, by, I think, shepherding these assets along and through these cycles and doing the appropriate things as leaders and making sure that you're not basically sacrificing future value, that, these assets will eventually come through that cycle. And then you're incredibly well positioned to hit the next wave. And that's, I think, something that this industry has done particularly well over many years of living through many mining cycles and knowing when to take your foot off the gas and when to put your foot on the gas in order to get these projects through and into development in a way that's going to make money for shareholders and all the stakeholders is the real key.
I think that's exactly the point. So let's talk about, so you've given me a perfect segue into Lucara. So let's talk about Lucara a little bit. One of the things I guess I find really fascinating about the diamond industry and Lucara is that, whereas in other industries, you don't have to do that much kind of marketing or put that much resources in kind of the consumer side. Like if you're a copper miner, you can sell it on the LME, or there's other kind of avenues that you can kind of go and sell them to. But you guys as a diamond company or a diamond industry, you kind of have to do, or it's probably wise for you to do that part as well as a company, because that kind of creates your appeal of your product and things like that. And I guess what I find interesting is in that Lucara, you guys do a lot of the involvement in the downstream part of the industry as well. Can you talk a little bit about why you wanted to get into that space?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think what's important to point out about diamonds is that, diamonds is the only mined commodity that really doesn't behave like a mined commodity. It's a consumer product. It's a marketed product.
That's right.
And it is, if you believe in global GDP growth, then, you're going to have a positive view about diamonds and the future of diamonds. And I think for a long time, the diamond supply chain kind of survived. I don't want to say realization, because we obviously always realized it's a consumer marketed product, but the way the supply chain, traditionally has worked in diamonds for more than 100 years is that you have the miners digging up the diamonds and ultimately selling them through to the midstream, which consists of diamond manufacturers, diamond polishers, diamond traders, who then ultimately transform the diamonds into polished product that then gets sold into retail and ultimately up into the brands. So you ended up with this kind of disjointed kind of supply chain where each participant is really making money on the backs of one of the other participants. And we as producers or miners said, you know what, we're really good at digging these things up, but we don't know anything about retail. We're going to try and maximize our rough selling price. You, the middleman, will try and figure out how you're going to maximize your margin when you polish it and sell it on.
And I think it's fair to say in this point that, the incentives between all these different agents weren't always aligned in a lot of ways either. The midstream people will try to hammer the producers as much as they can. So, because, if you can get the producer down a few more dollars, it means your margin increases on the other side when you sell it on to the consumer side of the business as well.
Absolutely. And it, not only was there, a lack of alignment, you could argue there was like really no alignment.
Right.
And so the problem with that is that you end up with these boom and bust cycles, where the midstream, in times of pressure, when the market is hot, end up overpaying for rough diamonds. And then if the cycle turns before they've finished polishing those diamonds and getting them out the door, then they're left with a whole bunch of high-priced inventory that they then have to heavily discount in order to move. And so this sort of boom and bust kind of volatility has really prevailed in the market for the last several years. And, we recognized a few years ago when I joined Lucara as CEO that the supply chain in many ways was broken and in real need of modernization. And, that we as producers needed to recognize that stability was the key to maintaining good prices and then growing prices thereafter. We deal with a commodity that fundamentally is rare. It really is rare, despite the kind of, the view that De Beers, has a giant vault of diamonds, and if they open it up, that, they'll be worth, pennies on the dollar. That's just simply not true. That might have been true, 25 years ago. But De Beers made a very deliberate strategic decision once the Canadians started selling outside the central selling organization, as did the Australians and the Russians, that they were not going to try
to artificially kind of control the market in some way.
We can look out in the future and see that we have depleting mines all over the world, aging mines. Argyle closed its doors last year. We have a number of the big Canadian mines nearing their end of life, their natural end of life. And so we know coming along on the horizon that there is no big new discoveries that really are going to move the dial in terms of supply. And so the fundamentals of this business actually look quite strong.
So Eira, can I talk a little bit about why were you tempted to become CEO? I mean, what opportunity did you see that you couldn't do as a founder, a large shareholder in the company? Why did you want to jump into the CEO seat?
It's not necessarily that I did. The way that it happened is that I had sold Kaminak to Goldcorp in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was looking around for something else to do at the time, and I had been presented an opportunity, not on the mining side, but on the technology side in diamonds by a prominent Canadian diamond manufacturing family that, again, saw the world very much the way I did, in that, this was a manufacturing family. And by the way, a lot of these diamond manufacturing families are third generation manufacturing families, where they've taken over these businesses.
Yeah, it's like the mafia in some ways.
Yeah, but what had happened in the case of this Canadian family is they had their youngest members of the family, recently come through, graduating from university, and one in computer science and the other in engineering, and they're learning the family business. And these young millennials are looking at their grandfather and saying, God, this is so antiquated. Why is it that we buy diamonds this way? It just doesn't make any sense. Like, surely with technology there is a better way. And their grandfather basically said to them, okay, boys, if you can think of a better way to do this, then have at it, and kind of locked them in an office for 2 years for them to think about this problem. And of course the problem without getting to a lot of boring detail, but because diamonds are such a heterogeneous commodity, as producers, we've always really struggled to produce diamonds consistently for repeatable value, right?
Mm-hmm.
You never really know what you're going to get out of the ground. There's 25,000 different categories of diamonds. So what did you get this month? What did you get last month?
That's right.
And so the way, you can't look up the price of a diamond in the newspaper every day like you can in gold or copper. So with each of these individual mineralogical specimens commanding a different price, that's a challenge as a major producer when you're trying to predict cash flow and have repeatable revenues. So the way we've solved that problem is basically to inventory diamonds over a certain period of time of production, And then once you got enough of them, you put them into broad buckets or categories based on size, color, clarity, and quality. And you basically put these, categorize these diamonds in a very crude way. And then you invite your midstream customers to come and purchase those buckets. And they don't get to choose.
Yep.
They get given a bucket and say, here you go. This bucket is, $10,000. This bucket is $20,000. And it's take it or leave it in the case of De Beers. If you're a Lucara and you're selling them on tender, we'd basically sell to the highest bidder. But in each and every case, you have to take the whole bucket back to your polishing factory at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And then invariably, what's amazing about this business is there's thousands of different manufacturers all over the world. They all manufacture different products. No two round diamonds are the same. They all have different proportions and girdle widths and, all different kind of parameters.
Mm-hmm.
And they sell and distribute into completely different marketplaces. So invariably, they take the bucket home, they look at the diamonds and they say, okay, well, we can only use a third of these diamonds for our business, and we're going to have to retrade the rest. And so there's a huge secondary market for rough diamonds as well, where a lot of these diamonds are retraded. And by our estimates, a single rough diamond can change hands up to 10 times before it lands on a polishing wheel somewhere in the world.
Wow.
And so, these young diamantaires are looking at this problem and thinking, well, this is just incredibly inefficient. This just doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I think, it's worth kind of saying the analogy, it's quite an interesting point you make, because what I found really interesting when I was looking into this as part of research for this is that at no point is there a kind of set methodology for the value to be determined. So at each step, like you said, it can kind of change hand 10 times. Those are 10 separate interactions where, depending on the needs of the seller and the buyer, the value has to be kind of negotiated at every step.
Yes.
Which seems like an incredibly slow process to sell something that you're trying to do.
Well, that's exactly right. It's slow, it's inefficient, it destroys value. It really just doesn't make a lot of sense. But the prevailing wisdom in our business has always been, if you want to sell all your diamonds on a regular basis for repeatable revenues, you got to parcel them, your nice ones up with your not so nice ones, and you've got to force your customers to buy them all, and then they work it out later. And so, we looked at this problem and just said, okay, this just doesn't make sense. And these two young gentlemen, tasked with finding a better way, ultimately found a much better way. And that became Clara Diamond Solutions, which was the venture that I kind of took on post Kamenak. And because I really felt Clara had the potential to really disrupt the current sales practices within the industry, and that really the essence of Clara is to, for the first time, to create alignment within the supply chain and have a digital web-based platform where the real secret sauce in Clara is a matching algorithm where we allow our customers to order polished diamonds. So forget rough now. They're telling Clara exactly what it is that they want to polish in their business. So they're giving an order in polished. And then Clara is searching through all the available rough inventory, which has been scanned, and there's a perfect 3D image made of each of those rough diamonds. And we now have a perfect 3D image of the polished diamond. And Clara basically finds the optimal match. It finds a rough diamond to meet the criteria for a polished outcome for each and every order that we receive. And in creating that match, you're getting the right diamond to the right polisher in one step instead of 10.
Yep.
And everybody's buying only what they need. So it means you're borrowing less if you're a buyer, means you've got more control over the price that you're paying, because you're specifying the price that you're willing to pay. It's all done in kind of a black box, and for the first time, we've created this, complete alignment within the value chain. So
for people that are familiar with eBay, it's effectively like when you put a filter on eBay to go, I'm looking for a set of golf clubs for this price, this far away from where I live, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you guys are kind of doing that part by trying to link the ultimate consumer to the producer or the person that owns the rough diamonds.
Exactly the same thing. And it's such a simple idea, but it had never been attempted in the industry. And, for my technology friends, when I was first investigating the potential of this and I was seeking their advice, they all looked at me like completely perplexed. And I was like, well, you don't think it's a good idea? They said, I just can't believe that it hasn't already been done. It's so obvious. Why is it?
And I think that's always a measure of a good idea, isn't it? When like someone kind of tells you and you go, yeah, of course, that's exactly what we should have. Yeah, that's I think always the litmus test of a great idea.
Yeah, so we've launched it, we've been commercializing it. The idea, it's a volume story, really. It's the first web-based digital marketplace for rough diamonds in the world. The other big advantage that we have is that it's underlain or underpinned by blockchain technology. So, we are tagging diamonds at their point of origin at the mine site and following them through the process. And, provenance has become a really important criteria for consumers. They want to know where their diamonds are coming from and that they're supporting responsible businesses
that
are about ESG. And so that piece has also been important. Yeah, and it's going really well. Now we're at the point where we have more demand than we could fulfill using diamonds from our own mines. So we need to open the platform up, and we're in discussions with other producers about doing that. And in the meantime, we entered into another strategic kind of arrangement with a similar goal, but while Clara is for our diamonds under 10.8 carats in size, we entered into an agreement with the HB group out of Antwerp for our big diamonds, and they in turn have partnered with Louis Vuitton and are polishing exclusive patented cuts for Louis Vuitton. But once again, the thesis is the same. What we're really trying to do here is to turn the supply chain on its head. We want to actually fulfill existing demand coming from the brands, as opposed to forcing production through the pipeline and just seeing, who's going to buy it at the end of the day. So it's really about working more closely with the brands to identify that demand. And, the best thing about working with a company like Louis Vuitton is they never put anything on sale. So
that's right.
You are protecting your prices. Those patented polished cuts will be worth more in the future because they will never be sold for less than you paid.
So when you say it like that, it makes total sense for a diamond company to kind of get involved in the full value chain of their produced product, right? The rough diamonds that you guys produce, it makes total sense for a company to kind of have that ownership or some level of ownership or some level of skin in the game along that whole process, so you can get some consistency of revenue. Do you think that, maybe the reason why companies haven't done this is because of the history of something like De Beers being so heavily involved in that whole value chain?
Yes, I think partially. I think partially the system worked reasonably well in the past for a whole host of reasons. I think, today and in recent years, it just has not been working as well. Margins have been squeezed in the midstream. And, even today, when we talk about it, we talk to our fellow producers, you do have some producers that will say, well, we see the merit in creating stability, but, there's always some sucker that will come along, Ira, and pay too much, for something. And, we kind of like that. And when you point out that 6 months later, prices are down 20% because that sucker has just had to, throw their inventory onto the market at bargain prices, it all ripples back, and it's really about trying to demonstrate that stability is much more desirable over volatility. We all have a vested
That's
interest.
right. Like, you can't deal with volatility on that level. Like some of the stuff, you kind of like when you read, you kind of go, there's no way you could play this business long term if that's the level of volatility that's kind of hanging around.
Agreed. And so it's really about that mindset. And, we're just so used to all playing in our own corners of the sandbox and not working together that it has been a big, cultural kind of piece to explain Clara and to get buy-in on Clara. But when we convince people to try it, the results are overwhelmingly positive. So we my view is this absolutely is the way of the future. It's inevitable. It's just a matter of, how long is it going to take us to get that full adoption. And, we've taken this technology around the world now. We've patented it everywhere. And it costs us very little to run the platform. So, we have time and patience to kind of see it through, but we are very hopeful in 2021 about bringing on much more significant third-party supply, and that in turn is really how Clara will become an important value center for Lucara. Right now it doesn't cost us much to run, but we're making a little bit of money, but it's not really transformative to our business. But if we can even get 10% of global market share for diamonds, and I think that's a very conservative outlook, but even if we got to 10%, the cash flow that we could generate through Clara would be just as important and would be comparable to the cash flow we're generating from the mine. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
So one of the things I find interesting is that as a diamond company, you are thinking about additional kind of revenue sources that are not directly linked to your hard assets. So do you think that that's, one way where the industry can kind of be a little bit more sustainable, where, like players in them have to kind of take these bets to try to perhaps make the companies a little bit more sustainable?
Yeah, like for us, sustainability is definitely a factor. I think the natural diamond mining industry has to do a better job of really espousing the benefits of our industry, whether it be in global jobs or, how we manage our environmental footprint, or, what we're investing in terms of local community development. But I think at the end of the day, for us, when you look at the universe of diamond mines around the world, there's under 25 active diamond mines in the world. So growth is a challenge. Like, just going and finding another asset is not as easy as it is in the gold business or the copper business. So
I guess that's the point I wanted to kind of get to, is that, like as a company, if you're just focusing on hard assets, isn't it a bit of a shrinking ocean kind of scenario?
Yeah, and there hasn't been a big investment in diamond exploration in the last 10 to 15 years either. So, we have our eyes on other assets and we continue to monitor. We've got a very modest kind of investment in new technology in respect of exploration as well that we're quite excited about. But at the end of the day, what we loved about Clara was that it was a business in the diamond industry. And though it wasn't a mining opportunity, it was a diamond opportunity. And so we felt that, there was good alignment and that it could represent a really viable kind of growth avenue for us. So I think we're trying to hit it hard on all fronts. Clara's, kind of step one. But we're also looking at other hard assets, and hoping that we can put another diamond mine into our portfolio at some point as well.
Like if I look back at your career, you've done quite a lot of things. So what is something that you haven't done that you would like to take on next? Like, not that I'm trying to shoo you out of Lucara in your current position, but Yeah, like what is something that you haven't done that you really like to kind of sink your teeth into next?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, and one of the reasons that I was keen to get into Lucara, I didn't really finish answering that question, but we had a CEO in 2017 who had been in the role for 10 years and really needed a change and was ready to move on. And I was kind of beavering away on Clara when Lucas called me up and said, "Okay, well, guess what? We need a CEO, and so guess what? You're up." And that's when we decided to put the two companies together because that was the big deliberation. Do these things belong together? I was pursuing a technology diamond company. Lucara was kind of at this important crossroads. What do we do with this asset? Are we going to expand it? Are we going to look for another asset? How do we grow this company? So we felt that Clara was a good first step. The second step was doing the work to understand the potential for expanding the mine underground, and really pleased that we've been able to put together an exciting project for underground expansion that will happen over the next 5 years now that we've raised an additional $220 million in the form of a debt facility.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, stepping into this role, I had been involved in a number of, starting my career as a geologist. I've been and really fortunate to be involved in a lot of exciting exploration ventures, even a couple that went on to, be developed as mines. And I'd had lots of experiences, through that part of the business. And, but with Lucara, it was really about stepping into that leadership role on the mining side, which I hadn't done before, and been involved in lots of boards at that level, but was really keen to get more involved in an actual operation. So that's been a fantastic experience for me. I've learned a lot, and I think as you get older and your career evolves, and I think we maybe talked about this a little bit before, I started out with the goal of finding things. Like that was the biggest incentive was just the excitement of going out and being paid to go treasure hunting every day. That was really what got me up in the morning.
Yep.
And after some success and getting into then, okay, well, now we found it, and how do we develop that? So going through the development phase, which was also a new learning. But then, the last piece for me was about, okay, we've got this great asset. Where do we take it from here? And, it really, a lot of it becomes around people and team. And that was something that I think I was ready to take on. And it's been, really rewarding to kind of build up a team of people. And, when I took on the operations, we had a lot of challenges. We were not performing well on an operational side. We had to change out our mining contractor, and we had to make a lot of changes within the organization. And it's just incredibly rewarding today to kind of, we just went through our last quarter, strong, stable production, the best in the 8-year history of the mine. And now we're, getting ready to move forward with the expansion. So that this chapter has been, again, completely new, and new challenges, new opportunities, and I've enjoyed that a lot. And I don't know if I have a next in terms of aspiration. It might be something completely different, but I am really grateful that I've had the chance to kind of experience every aspect of the mining business over the last 35 years. And I'll be also excited to pass the baton to the next generation.
Maybe the next thing is just kind of putting your feet up and enjoying your spare time for a while.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to retire. I will definitely be doing something. It's just I love the way our world is going in many ways. I mean, there's so many big challenges out there. I don't certainly want to make light of that, but I think just the pace of change that's happening is very exciting, and I think there's going to be lots of things to do here.
I think that's probably a pretty good spot to end on. Thanks a lot for joining us, Eira. Again, I appreciate you giving up this much time.
Not at all. It was very enjoyable. Thank you so much. It's been fun to spend some time with Exploration Radio, and it's been great. Yeah, well, look forward to speaking again.
All right, sounds good. And again, thanks a lot for giving up this much time. I really, really appreciate it.
Not at all. Thank you.
Excellent.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Eira. This episode of Exploration Radio was produced by Ahmad Salim and Steve Beresford, edited by Sean Jeffrey, and recorded remotely in April and May of 2021. If you like this podcast, then consider becoming a sponsor to help us continue producing more of this content. You can email us on info@explorationradio.com or check out www.explorationradio.com to find out more about us. You can also reach out to us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram. Until next time, let's keep exploring.